Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I'm newtmechanist, and tonight we're going to be playing the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles once again. We'll be picking up with the next day of investigation in the murder trial of a scientist with terrible self-preservation instincts. Before we get into that, though, let's check in with the kitties. We do have Ember, of course, in her favorite spot, getting all toasty with her head leaned up against that little pillow there. We have Sherbet in the play area. I have adjusted some of the lighting, so that's why we have that light and dark streak down the middle of that camera. You can't really tell over where Ember is. The screen is plenty bright still. But it's much less glary in the room now. I don't see... Oh, there's... I think that's Sammy. Yep, Sammy's in the upper left now. Bottom left corner. She's kind of peeking up the ramp. But yeah, Great Ace Attorney tonight. We haven't been playing, well, we paused playing that last week to do a little bit of other things, a little bit of a palate cleanser, as it were. But we're going to be back at it. Based on the schedule, we'll be playing that twice this week. Should get us through the current case, he said. With that in mind, let's get in there. Which camera did I have set? There we go. A little snooze and Ember. So, if I recall, we had words. The last day of the trial had raised a couple of concerns about the sequence of events that they described. One was the presence of another balloon that seemed to have exploded right around the time that the little capsule containing the victim appeared in that space before it fell. And one of the contentions of the prosecution is that the invention did in fact work, that the person was teleported. Just that the initial explosion changed its angle and he was teleported into the air and then fell down to the tower. They had still been asserting that the accused stabbed the victim with his screwdriver, but that has been called into question since there wasn't any sign of blood at the scene, and that the teleportation process is capable, as described, is capable of moving metal. Even though initially the scientist thought it couldn't, we showed that his glasses, which were metal, did come with him. So, in theory, the screwdriver should have come along. But it didn't. It was still down on the machine, with no pool of blood to go with it. So, then we had a picture that was taken by one of the witnesses that showed the presence of another balloon right next to this one, where the balloon operator said there shouldn't have been one. And the sign of some sort of like flaming object or bright object coming from the base of the stage towards this second balloon. The assertion being that the crossbow that we found, the collapsible crossbow that we found near the scene, was used to fire a incendiary projectile at this other balloon. And that the capsule containing the victim was actually contained in that second balloon, and that it was sort of a sleight of hand kind of maneuver. A body double steps up onto the stage, the smoke spreads out everywhere and obscures everyone's view. The double in that container are removed, and then the bolt hits the balloon and reveals the actual container, which then drops onto the crystal tower. But we'll see how things actually go. This is the investigation day following that. So, like, we have Von Zeke's here investigating as well. What a terrible explosion it must have been. Oh, and we have Susato back. Now, I can't recall when that actually happened, but she's back as of this point. Even the steel girders have buckled and twisted in the blast. And what they called the bird cage was right in the middle of it all, just here. There was let's call it an angular cylinder. I'm sure there's a name for it. It's the kind of shape that you got out of old school Final Fantasy crystals. The sort of like multi-sided pyramid pointy thing at the top, and then faceted sides straight down between the two pyramids on top and bottom. It's kind of like that, but like a wooden cage. But look, Mr. Naruhodo, that metal grill on the floor. Looks as though it's designed to open. Ooh. Is it a trapdoor? It does, doesn't it? The floor had opened at the precise moment the explosion occurred. The birdcage could have dropped through and disappeared from sight. Yeah, I hadn't noticed these little things around the edges of each of the segments of this hexagon have hinges on them. So each of these triangle flaps could drop down. Though in theory they could also lift up, we have no indication of which way the hinges go. I mean, I suppose they could go both ways. I don't think there's any doubt that this was a very elaborate hoax, is there? I mean, it even looks like, because these apertures here, these little porthole-looking dealies, were where the smoke spilled out. It looks like the device was designed to jet smoke out and then up around the cage, conceal the cage, block the stage and hole. So that chain there is supposed to have broken during the explosion, and that caused the blast that did that caused the ray gun to tip upward. So the connecting chain is broken, it pops up. But the way that chain is set, I mean, I guess the back end is way heavier than the front. Because that chain doesn't look like it's adjustable in any way. It's not like it's attached to, say, like a pulley mechanism or something like that. So I guess that must have been like a lock. They got chains of precisely the right length attached to it to keep it pointed in the right direction. Or the right height or angle. To that horn-shaped transmitting device. Isn't it amazing? That's exactly what I thought when I first saw it. It makes you think, doesn't it? If only it had just been a normal horn, none of this would have happened. Big explosion, man dies. Womp womp. almost exactly what I thought as well. I bet I can predict what you're going to say next in that case. You're about to say, "Nothing ever goes to plan," aren't you? Oh no, I would never say something like that. Smacked down. However much I look at them, I just can't come to terms with those Tamari handballs floating in the sky. That's what he says the balloons look like. I've been glaring at them constantly since we came up here. Sorry, the feeling of wanting to ride in one and wanting never to set foot in one are fighting it out inside me. But if you don't look where you're walking, you might fall from the stage. I don't think I'd notice. That's how fiercely the battle inside me is raging. I think you should make peace with riding one, Mr. Naruhodo. It really would be much safer that way. This wasn't here yesterday. So this is the bird cage thing. Looks, it also looks hexagonal. Really? If I'm not mistaken, it's the cage in which the victim was standing before he was apparently beamed through the air. That's right, the bird cage. According to what Professor Harebrain said in court, it's made of wood. Or more precisely, Japanese cypress, I think. Despite having been in the explosion and then falling from a great height, it's relatively unharmed. A wonderfully durable construction, wouldn't you say, Mr. Naruhodo? I'd understood that the forensic investigation team had taken it away yesterday to examine it. I suppose they must have brought it back here when they'd finished their work. But sadly, not with the body inside of it. Aw, too bad. Should have brought the corpse back to rot in the sun. Then we could oogle it. No, that's right. I know we were given strict instructions not to touch anything, but still... This is too important a piece of evidence to overlook. We might need it for the trial. Are they implying that he just stuffed the whole bird cage in his pocket? I mean, the fact that it's... like... we have to be able to touch it is kind of how they're describing it. This is far too important. Whoop! We better eyeball that. We better press the right button in order to eyeball that. Look here, Miss Susato. Oh yes, the wood's cracked and broken a little. I suppose because it fell from such a height. If you look, the bottom has taken the most damage. It fell straight down. From the height at which the balloon was flying down into the crystal tower below. Fall of about 30 feet or 9 meters. Leaving the man inside tragically dead. Yeah, I expect the damage of both of them will line up. beverage. Least approachable man in the world winner, 10 years in a row. Be strong, Mr. Naruhodo. Your country and your assistant stand firm behind you. Lord Von Zeeks. Surprised he's not wearing his cape. What? Well, beautiful weather we're having, isn't it? I thought I was making it quite clear that I didn't want to be disturbed. Apparently, you Nipponese are unequipped to read the signs. Lord grudge against the Japanese still. Oh, I read them. So what are you doing here? Entry to this area is prohibited. Well, the thing is, Lord Chief Justice Strongheart granted us permission to investigate. On the condition that we didn't disturb anything. And yet you've managed to disturb me. Ah. Never mind. State your business, then. Come to think of it, there are quite a few things I'd like to ask Lord Von Zeeks about. Not least of which is that awful case, even though it's nothing to do with this. Ask away, Mr. Naruhodo. You won't know unless you try. So, Clint. So, his older brother died in a murder case involving a killer called the Professor, I think. The serial killer that went around particularly targeting local nobility. Was the name of your older brother, I understand, Lord Von Zeeks. You Nipponese. I always have to be on guard whenever you're around. So you've been investigating me, have you? Oh, no, it's not like that. Well, alright, it is a bit like that. Okay, maybe a little more like that. Okay, totally like that. We're very nosy. My older brother was also a prosecutor. He was the pride of the Von Zeeks family. But tragically, a vicious killer took him from us. The Professor, you mean? Laugh? Is something funny? That's the extent of what you've discovered, is it? I shouldn't be surprised. Sorry, there's more to it then? Lackluster work is very much your trademark, isn't it? He's not wrong. I think the entirety of the Phoenix Wright extended set of games is based around bumbling investigation on the part of many individuals. It's necessary so that the games can happen. You're too kind. Are you going to tar all Nipponese with the same brush next? So tell me, what's your interest in that historic incident? As it happens, Lord Von Zeeks, there's a rather curious case that's come to our attention. Are you aware of the Madame Tuspel's Museum of Waxwork by any chance? I am, naturally. I believe that since last month I feature in one of the displays there, for public scorn. Of course, the infamous Reaper of the Bailey would have to be exhibited, wouldn't he? Well, a particular waxwork has been stolen from the place, and held for ransom. A particular waxwork? Which... Wait, you mean Yes, it's the professor. Mr. Sholmes is investigating the case as we speak. I was unaware of that. He's turned as white as a sheet. Enoch Drebber... Oh. Enoch Drebber is the engineer slash stage magician that he's known for setting up contraptions that are meant to be like false devices and the like, whether they are complex magician kind of illusions or that are meant to be fake experiments. And he was apparently involved in the construction of this. Are the police trying to locate the engineer, Mr. Drebber, already? Surely that goes without saying. We're very keen to see him found as well. The trouble is, we don't have much to go on aside from the description of the man we heard in court earlier. Which, according to Professor Hairbrain, was of a tall, thin gentleman who has straight white hair and wears a black monocle. So I was just wondering, I mean, I realize it's probably not possible, but we'd very much appreciate any more clues you can give us. Wow, Susato really knows how to take the bull by the horns. I mean, at least she gets to the point. Fine, why not? I have a photograph of the man here from an investigation 10 years ago. Yeah. I bet if he takes that hat off, he's got villain tattooed on his forehead. He's the kind of guy you expect to see falling through stained glass to stab praying girls in the back. What? Oh, no, nothing. I was just surprised that you shared that with us. We all need the man's testimony in court tomorrow, which means we have to do everything we possibly can to track him down in the short time available. So why wouldn't I show you the photograph? Just like with Edgeworth, they do show his goal is justice. So he's exceptionally brutal and sometimes a little, like, not infrequently, a little over-aggressive when it comes to prosecution. But when it turns out that somebody has deceived him or is lying to the court, he does not take that well at all. It's not like he finds out they were lying and it's like, oh, okay, but I'm still going to trust them. Now, I'm sorry, we're still going to trust their testimony. He, like the judge, seems to be fine with letting them try again after they've lied all the time for the entire testimony. What is it about Lord Von Zeeks? Sometimes I just can't work him out at all. Photograph of Drebber. This is, I believe, Von Zeek's apprentice. The file I requested for the trial tomorrow. Thank you. You may go, incredibly suspicious man. Are you all right? Who is this man, Mr. Naruhodo? And he's definitely not going to turn out to be like Kazuma. So they made a big deal that Kazuma was definitely dead, and that the one that pronounced him definitely dead was Sholmes. Then his body disappears when it was supposed to be dropped off for transport back to Japan. It's Lord Von Zeke's apprentice, apparently. So I'm not the only one. Susato can see it too. So they had offhandedly mentioned, could Kazuma still be alive? Lord Von Zeeks, may we speak with your apprentice for a moment? With him? Why? Kazuma, yeah. Kazuma? Yeah. I wonder if they're going to go with the amnesiac angle, is that he was in Kazuma was definitely involved in something bigger than just him coming over here as a legal exchange student. I don't believe it. Your posture, your presence. It can only be. It's you, isn't it, Kazuma? I felt something strange the very first time I encountered this cloaked figure. As if I knew him somehow. Can it really be you, Kazuma? Wait. Too late. What's going on here? What is your interest in my apprentice exactly? You act as if you know the man or something. Well, since when has he been in your care? I don't recall you having an apprentice before I left Britain 6 months ago. Lord Strongheart introduced him to me about 3 months ago now, with instructions to mentor him as a prosecutor. But he didn't tell you why, did he? The man appears to be suffering from amnesia. He's forgotten every last detail about himself. Yeah. He has amnesia. Tomorrow he will appear in court at my side. Huh? What now? He's to serve as my judicial assistant on Lord Strongheart's orders. He'll be in court with us. Now then, unless I'm much mistaken, I believe this conversation has run its course. Oh, yes, thank you. I definitely saw a reaction there. When Susato called out like that, it really seemed to hit a nerve. When she called out Kazuma. You'd already met that masked man, hadn't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Yes, yesterday, in fact, at Lord Von Zeke's office. I see. And if Kazuma really is still alive, it means that Mr. Sholmes lied to us. Sholmes is keeping secrets from us? Gasp. Gasp and shock. How could you? I know. We're going to need to speak to him about that. You're going to have to leave now. Shoot, shoot. The forensic investigation team are due to arrive shortly. If they find you here, it will cause problems. What sort of problems? Foreign affairs problems. Well, we could do without that. Alright, we'll be on our way. Let's go, Miss Susato. Of course. Gina. We were actually hoping that we could investigate the scene again. Yeah, alright. If it's around here, you can do what you want, what you like. Oh, that's alright, is it? I'm gonna be playing with me new friend here. Ah, yes, Toby. Woof. Apparently we can't look around on the stage now because the forensic investigation team are at work. Can't you do anything, Gina? In your capacity as Inspector Lestrade? Look, I'd like to help you out. But I'm just a trainee, ain't I? Ain't nothing I can do. When it suits you, yes. Crystal Tower. I can't believe I'm seeing it at such a close proximity with my own eyes. You've really been looking forward to the great exhibition, haven't you, Miss Susato? Oh yes, when I found out that I had to return to Japan, I'm afraid I cursed my luck. But here you are, back in London, gazing up at the magnificent tower. I know, perhaps I was wrong to curse my luck so harshly. Look, a flying balloon. Never seen one in the flesh before. I can't understand how they can fly, and so high up as well. You must be able to see for miles and miles. I do think of it, and it terrifies me. I mean, it would be certain death if you fell out. I'm sure they're perfectly safe. After all, they've been invented by some of the brightest minds in the world. And the brightest minds in the world always have safety in mind. Got that sort of fight groom going on here with Ember and Sky. Like, he'll go in for a scruff bite, but he generally won't swipe at her. If she gets the chance when this kind of thing is going on, she will hiss and swipe. Let's not forget that we know at least one has exploded. Hey there, Tass. How you doing? Well, he's been bopped once. We are now in cat face-off. Let's do a check for the others now that has culminated in a fight. they're all hiding out. Or at least all of them are like slightly off camera. They have looped back around. Yeah, what we just witnessed was a common result of Sky and Ember approaching that same spot. Is either they will it'll eventually turn into a fight where Ember will either run or she'll swat Sky until he gives up and walks away. Or they will snuggle up and nap together. It really is one or the other. I'm sure there are other ways to fly. We were invited to visit the forensics lab. Very it's got some very classic creepy room markers in it. So of course you have the human skeleton somewhere in it, whether it be a medical model or it's being a bully today, it would seem. The brute. Uh, I'd have to go break those two up before this guy gets clawed across the face or something. So you just saw them get near the cat tree, and you can see Ember's tail lashing here. Uh, what you couldn't see is Sky getting deflected away from her when she hissed and swung at him. She's she's reaching. I've had enough of you. And now I can hear him crying a little bit, like she's being mean to me. He is not giving up. This guy is definitely being a bully. And it is disrupting the rest of the kitties. This guy is right off camera to Ember's right now. It's that we're getting a bit of that. The cats are very like aggressively not making eye contact with each other. The thing is, Tass, he's trying to remind everybody who's boss, but really he's just trying to show everybody that he's biggest. Um, I think the only reason he can get away with pretending to be boss is all of the other cats are a lot less confrontational. Um, like Sherbet would run away, but if Mason, Ember, or Sammy really got aggressive, um, I don't think Sky would stand a chance because he's definitely bigger, but he's not. He plays rough. He doesn't fight. You know. Yeah, there's like a. It's down and right from the camera that Ember's on. There's kind of a trunk that Sky is sitting on. So we are very much getting that they're not looking at each other, but you can tell they're facing off. I believe this is it. Dr. C's laboratory. Chemical smell really assaults the nose. There's plenty to assault the eyes in here, too. It looks as though the doctor isn't here. But we're here now, so we may as well do some sightseeing, don't you think? Snoop. Snoop like your life depends on it. What a seasoned tourist you've become, Miss Susato. We could just have a little look around, being careful not to upset any restless souls. I mean, you have to respect how neat their tools are given the time period. I mean, there's a little splotching on the what is almost certainly an autopsy table here, but You know, the bone saws, the scalpels, the syringes, and whatnot. All of them very clean. Table and a set of sharp tools. When you consider each in isolation, it all looks quite innocent. Why is it that when you put them side by side, they seem so horribly disturbing? I mean, that is true. Just about any one of those tools that you see there, the hammer, the various pliers, the knives, the drill, all of those things just kind of, I mean, even on like a pegboard on the wall or sitting out on the table wouldn't be very threatening. But when they're in like a velvet lined suitcase in their own little slots, those are taking on a much more sinister air. That kind of suitcase is the sort of thing that you can open in a menacing way. Keeping an eye on Ember because she's been having to deal with Sky extensively here. It might be best not to ponder it too deeply. Seeing the large tome that's open on the desk does make me wonder, though. How can anybody concentrate on bookwork with this acrid odor of chemicals in the air? You'd either have to have a cast iron constitution or a really terrible sense of smell, or just be entirely used to it. Well, look at this. What a magnificent display case. The cherry wood has been polished to a high sheen, and the intricate carving is a joy to behold. Western cabinet makers really are very skilled, aren't they? You have nothing to say about the skeleton inside, Mr. Naruhodo? Miss Susato, can't you tell that I'm trying very hard to avoid talking about the terrifying contents of the case? No, I don't. And I was actively trying to not even consider that there is a skeleton in this case. Thank you for that. It's how I cope. Oh, it's a grown up version of the close your eyes. If I can't see it, it's not there. I'll be sure to remember that from now on. I suppose this is Dr. C's desk. I would not like to work in a place like this. It's very tidy, though, isn't it, Mr. Naruhodo? Imagine how efficiently she must work. Like he might have finally chilled out. The lighting is poor, which is bad for the eyes. The chemical smell can't be good for you, not to mention the skeleton watching over you as you work, which is definitely bad for the nerves. Well, yes, those are valid concerns, I suppose. I can just about cope with a one-eyed Daruma doll watching over me, but that's all. Look at all the bottles on the shelves in these cabinets. What an assortment of chemicals. These ones here are labeled highly toxic. That's worrying, because there are also things that look like salt and pepper shakers in there. Yes, they actually say salt and pepper on them. I mean, when you're having lunch, it's useful to have a variety of condiments on hand. You know, salt, pepper, formaldehyde. Gives that sandwich a little bit of extra zing to it. The doctor probably spends a lot of time in this room, I suppose. Perhaps she has meals here sometimes. Life goes on, even when you're surrounded by death. Looks like an owl and a crow up there. I know, and they haven't even twitched since we came in here. Well, no, they wouldn't have. They're taxidermy mounts, Mr. Naruhodo. I was afraid you were going to say that. I've been trying very hard to tell myself they're just sleeping with their eyes open. I'm afraid he's dead, sir. No, he's just sleepy. Very, very sleepy. Dozed right off with a jar of ketchup in his hands, and it spilled all over him. So sleepy. I think perhaps you were wise to put something like your Daruma doll on display in the office instead. Some critical object in here to trigger the doctor to inevitably appear. Those large jars seem to have pale things floating around inside them. I suppose they're fruit liqueurs or something. Or like the pickled umeboshi plums we make back home. That is exactly what they are. Delicious pickles. Oh, best not to eat the laboratory pickles. Father had jars like that in his laboratory as well. I expect they're human organs in a preserving solution, probably as examples of some rare medical conditions. Gives the pickles that extra flavor. Miss Susato, there are some things in the world that it's perfectly fine never to know about. Ever. You heard the statement, ignorance is bliss? Well, you're really harshing my bliss right now. So, as I said, I'm sure they're fruit liqueurs or umeboshi, aren't they? Of course. Oh, cute. It really is. That is just excellent. The way that he is very actively denying what he's seeing. Well, I think we've got to move somewhere else. I expect there might be some other location we can go to and then return to the lab. A bit different this time. She seems to have drawn a lot of little stick figures all lined up. Look. Cheap apples at the market is what all of them say. What? The little figures can speak? All of your questions would be answered if only you would read this month's Ranced magazine. So I'm the only one who can't make any sense of this? Must be some... essentially, it must be a reference to her latest story about Sholm's adventures. If I've remembered correctly, this large and imposing lump of iron is called a typewriter. mean, imposing lump of iron is kind of accurate for old-style typewriters. Some of those things were beasts. To think that every single one of the adventures of Herlock Sholmes blossomed from this very machine. It's such a dreamy thought. I actually had to go on it the other day. The metal bars that move when you hit the keys got all tangled up somehow. That made Iris angry. Mr. Naruhodo, you're ruining my dreamy thoughts. Don't do that again. I've made Susato angry as well. I remember that happening, where you might hit the keys wrong or hit the keys in just the wrong sequence, and the little hammers would catch on each other. Then you had to try to wrangle that without touching the ink ribbon and making an even bigger mess. Ah, bad times. Bad times. Yes, the heavy curtains in the middle of the House of Horrors. Whatever's on the other side of them, you just know it's going to be terrifying, don't you? The sign says it's the Madame Tuspel's special exhibit. The one that we know that the Professor waxwork was supposed to be in, but has been stolen. It seems you have to pay extra to go inside. I know, can you believe that? Pay more money? As if we haven't been scared enough already? It's not my doing, Mr. Naruhodo. Huh. The professor's been busy. I mean, I would say covering your prison cell with equations has just about got to be the only thing that you can write on chalk on the inside of a prison cell or padded room that isn't going to make you seem a little off kilter. Or at least is less likely to make that happen, you know? You generally don't go from math equations on the wall to axe through the door quite as quickly. Okay, they're finally playing nice. What's he doing? Hi. The whole wall of the cell is covered in mathematical equations. And he's still writing more now. Professor, sorry to interrupt. Ah, Mr. Naruhodo. And who is this young lady? My name is Susato Mikotoba, and I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant. It's a pleasure to meet you, Professor. Oh, if only I'd met a refined young woman like you sooner. None of this would have happened. Oh, that's not logical. That makes no sense at all. I'm sorry if my presence here upsets you. I owe you an apology too, Professor. I didn't manage to deliver what I promised you I would in court this morning. Effectively, it came down to do I keep this guy from getting a guilty verdict and thus executed, or do I protect his work by continuing to assert that it was actually a successful experiment or a real experimental device? But it came down to making the call that like pushing the professor to acknowledge that all the evidence was pointing to the device being flawed. Since he hadn't constructed it, he'd given the specifications to somebody else, but he had really no part in it being built. So it is possible, if not highly likely, that the machine is actually part of a plan or a scam, regardless of whether his equations are correct. Oh, no. No, no, no. No, 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 no. The whole thing, the whole miserable affair, it all happened because I've been such a complete and utter clot. Professor Hairbrain, what have you been working on in your cell? You mean that? Oh dear, how embarrassing. I was suddenly struck by an idea, you see, and I simply had to write it down. The wall was all I had to hand. Is it some new hypothesis? Something to surpass super high voltage instantaneous kinesis, maybe? Ah, no, actually. This is my autobiography. I mean, I guess using a very complex equation, you could set up a sort of cipher and then translate it, but I don't see any sort of, encrypted line somewhere. Your autobiography? In my experience, those are colloquialisms that imply some inappropriateness that is very aggressive. Like, he's very emphatic about how he was cheated and scammed. Found I can represent my odd fortunes with only odd numbers in an ambitious set of simultaneous equations. Really? I'm going to have to pay back all the loans I took for the kinesis machine, you see. It's going to be a new serial production for the coming month. Part 1, an odd birth, an odd upbringing. It reminds me of those little religious tract kind of miniature comic books that tend to be really cartoonish vilifications of some everyday thing now. You know, a little comic book that's all about the evils of comic books and how reading one is going to turn you into some sort of rampant homicidal maniac. It's the sort of thing that you used to get, like, how Dungeons and Dragons made me kill my parents kind of little comics. Can't beat the man's optimism, that's for sure. I see. Well, for now, would you mind if we talked a little more about the case? Ah, yes, of course. I've been working through the numbers. By Usman, by the aloof engineer, Trevor. We're not going to have to sit through an explanation of all these equations, are we? Everything I believed in has been turned on its head. My research, Mr. Usman, the kinesis machine, my hypothesis even. I'm sorry it's come to this. There was really no other way. No, it's not your fault. I wanted to protect my work, but in the end there was nothing worth protecting. It was never my intention to deceive anyone. I didn't want to trick the public. No, of course you didn't. But in court this morning I realized something. Oh? If you've done something wrong without knowing it, you've still done something wrong. Logically, it makes no difference if you were aware of it or not. Ignorance is a poor excuse. The blame still lies with me. Oh, Professor. He believed in me this morning, you know. Barak did. He believed in my hypothesis. Well, I think that was just a necessary factor in the prosecution establishing its case. No, Barak wouldn't do something like that. I'm sure he genuinely believed it. Did he? I think I understand now. Why it was that he decided to take on the prosecution in my trial, I mean. After the terrible accident happened, nobody would believe in my hypothesis anymore. Not the police, not the prosecution service. Not any lawyers, even. I feel like I've dealt some sort of finishing blow here. I finally, once and truly, crushed, or I finally, once and for all, crushed this man's hopes and dreams. If any other prosecutor had taken the case, if it was anyone other than Barak, I'm sure the prosecution would have declared my hypothesis a complete and utter nonsense. And in that case, you would have been declared a fraud yourself, Professor. Exactly, which would have been a fate worse than death for me. But Barak insisted that I was a proper man of science from start to finish. You think that's why he... I know him very well indeed. He's an extremely kind-hearted soul. He just doesn't look it in any way at all. But that extremely kind-hearted soul spent all morning trying to paint you as a murderer, didn't he? Well, admittedly, that part of the analysis appears to have some flaws in it. What about the whole Reaper side of things? Does that fit in with the kind-hearted soul idea? Do you think he set out to trick me from the very start? I'm sorry to say, that does seem likely, yes. When I first met him, he introduced himself as a wealthy financier. He looked over the paper I'd written, said my work would benefit all of humanity and must be pursued. He was so enthused, he was so emphatic. But in reality, he was the mastermind of some vast criminal network, it seems. I still can't believe it. As the machine was essentially a set decoration for some stage magic. It probably didn't require a large amount of investment, actually. But the scale of it, it wasn't just some small trick. It was a very elaborate feat of deception. All young scientists are full of hope about their burgeoning ideas, full of zeal. But none of us have any money. We want to do research, but we can't afford it. Many of us take on barely legal part-time work to try to earn just a few measly pennies to carry on. Go through all of that only to be taken for a complete fool. It's just too rotten to believe. It is, I agree. And that's why we have to find those responsible and bring them to justice. Mr. Usman is no more, of course, which leaves only the engineer. Mr. Enoch Drebber. Is he an engineer, or a magician, or a swindler? Little from column A, little from column B. Misclicked. Since then, I've met him many times to discuss details about the kinesis machine. But at no point did you have any inkling that he was just an illusionist? Oh, he definitely wasn't just an illusionist. What do you mean? He has a wealth of deep scientific knowledge. There's no question that the man's a genuine scientist. It's instantly apparent in conversation. I mean, that's one of the aspects, is there are a lot of, essentially, illusion machines or stages and whatnot that rely on very precise placement in construction to actually pull off the trick. So if you're hand making that kind of thing and it's super convincing, then it's going to take some work. It's going to take some know-how. It's the sort of practical special effects and props kind of stuff. No question that the man's a genuine scientist. It's instantly apparent in conversation. I see. But the wretched man deceived you, Professor. It's unforgivable. We must do everything that we can to find him and bring him to justice. Are there no more clues you can give us about his whereabouts? I'm sorry, we only ever discussed the kinesis machine. Nothing else. Although, just once, I did visit his workshop. What workshop? Drebber's enormous fabrication laboratory, where he constructed my great machine. Why didn't you mention this before? Enoch Drebber's workshop. There's every chance we might find the man there. So you've been to Drebber's place of work, then? Yes, just once, you understand. It was an enormous place, plenty of room to construct the kinesis machine, you see. Where can we find it? We have to go there at once. There's a good chance that we'll find Drebber there. Well, yes, definitely, I'm sure. As in, I'm sure you're not going to want to hear this. But I have absolutely no idea where the workshop is at all. I'm so sorry. I was more than half expecting that. You see, I was blindfolded in the carriage the entire way there. He blindfolded you? He wasn't taking any chances then. The place was incredible, the pinnacle of modern engineering. And the oil he used was the very best, a special French machine oil that's impossible to obtain in Britain. The indescribable scent of that imported oil. Perfumers across the world should forget their secret formula and use that instead. He's really into the smell of that oil, even the memory of it. It's a very happy wiggle. Do you think, Miss Susato? Oh, the machine for your next birthday? I've never used any kind of perfume, Mr. Naruhodo, and I'm not sure I'd like to start with that. I don't suppose you know even part of the workshop's address, Professor? You know, you don't have a business card from Mr. Drebber, for example? Man was very cautious, Miss Susato. Aha! Yes, I do. He gave me his business card once. It's right here, look. Let me see that. Snatch. Throw etiquette to the wind, why don't you? Enoch Drebber, engineer. I'm afraid that's all it says. There's no address. No, oh well, I can't say I'm surprised. Still, this could be useful. Cipher, we have the rectangle and the cross here. This dark smudge here. I think perhaps it's machine oil. Yes, possibly. Professor Harebrain mentioned something about the oil Mr. Drebber uses, didn't he? He said it was specifically imported, very high quality oil that's impossible to obtain in Britain. Right, but more importantly, that it's more fragrant than the finest perfume. So, excuse me a moment. It doesn't appear to have any scent at all. Don't worry, I expect that's just because there's such a tiny amount on here. Oops. Better not try going up the stage now. If we were to bump into the forensic investigation team, it sounds like it could make trouble. We keep returning here because we're looking for Sholmes. There's a stepladder here. Look. Oh, yes, a stepladder. I think perhaps we should let the proprietress know that someone's left it out. The stepladder, I mean. Is something wrong? Why do I feel as though I just managed to sidestep an argument? In the Phoenix Wright ones, especially when Maya Fey is present, there is a running gag about one of them calling something like that a ladder, and then the other is, I think that's just a step ladder. And then the former saying, you know, you need to get over these semantics kind of thing. In this case, they both like, yep, step ladder. Something we missed in here that could trigger it? There, nothing there, nothing there. About this, Gina. I'm still learning me letters at the moment. I only know A and A to E, so if it ain't too much, bleeding trouble. Actually, Gina, it's the back of the card that's important. How come? Ah, okay. So the dog is it's effectively meant to be like a bloodhound. He's a scent tracker. The machine oil is supposed to be fragrant, but they can't smell it. So I'm guessing what they're hoping is that the dog will lead them there. Just a dirty old smudge in the back, that's all. It turns out that this is a very high-quality French machine oil. It has a very particular scent, apparently. You don't say. Let's have a whiff, then. You sure? I don't smell nothing. No, we didn't mean that you should smell it. Oh, right. You mean Toby. Woof. His sense of smell is so good, he can track people over the oceans, can't he? Professor Hairbrain informs us that this oil is unique to Mr. Drebber's workshop. Aiming the dog at us. It's like a firearm that she doesn't want to have to use. I think he's picked up the scent. So you mean, if he follows the scent of this oil, Toby could lead us to that dodgy cove's workshop? That's right. That's exactly what we were hoping. All right, then. We'll give it a go. I'll just borrow that. Yoink. Well, wait, when did you... Once a pickpocket, if I can lead everyone to that Drebber's workshop, I'll be the boss's boss before next week. Oh, yes, Gina. I'm sure you'll be promoted. Poor Gregson. All right, then, Hodo. Leave it to me. Sorry? We're going to get going after that dodgy engineer cove right this minute. Oh, but hang on. Someone's supposed to be on guard duty here all the time. I'm afraid we can't help. We need to get on with our investigation as well, Gina. Oh, right. Oh, well, never mind. It ain't gonna be me what gets it in the neck. It'll be the boss. She has discovered the terrible loophole that can work in this sort of situation sometimes. Is the being in a situation where it's plausible that your superior would be in trouble for letting it happen. And realizing that as long as it doesn't seem that you, like, out of true negligence did something, that you can just point to your boss and say, well, he should have known better than putting a rookie like me on this task. Of course I was going to mess it up. Poor Gregson again. Puppy. Ready, Toby? Got that oil scent, have you? Come on then, boy. Later. I do hope the scent of that oil leads them to that swindler's workshop. I hope so, too. Ideally before the dog swims across the channel to France. We're going to go a little bit longer, folks. Exhaustion is starting to set in. Just here. I return here and look around because some of the different characters can kind of pop up unexpectedly, especially Sholmes. He can sometimes be hiding in the background. Hmm. Just bumping into the forensics team. It's the Crystal Tower. Okay, I do think we're going to stop there. Like I said, I think sleep issues are catching up to me again, and I don't want to nod off for you folks. So we're going to wrap up there. Yeah, sleep issues are a thing, Tass. Trying to head it off before I accidentally reverse my sleep schedule. Well, thanks for watching, folks, and have a good evening.